Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. I'm your host Terry. You know, I realized I didn't do that intro last video, so if you were confused, I apologize. So I had a good, so today's the 6th. It's, you know, the 6th isn't important in my life. The 5th is. Yesterday was the 45th 4-5 anniversary of me getting on a plane and going to boot camp, Navy boot camp. 45th anniversary. That's insane. Like when I remember getting off that bus, it was dark out, and took the bus from O'Hare with a bunch of other people that didn't know what the hell they were getting into. And yeah, I just remember getting off the bus and I was like, this place doesn't look like a boot camp. But it did. To me, it was weird. And, you know, you don't want to look around. You're like afraid to like look around and try to orient yourself. And yeah, it was pretty interesting. So I was in company 349, and I went on November 5th to boot camp, and I graduated on New Year's Eve. So that was a good reason to party. So anyway, today's the 6th. Today, though, is kind of important because I just did something that I haven't done in a long time. And that is I rode my bike on a road. And I came up here to Gettysburg to do some other stuff. But I brought my bike because I knew where I was going to be. And I was kind of telling a friend, you know, the battlefield basically surrounds the town of Gettysburg on 4 sides. Not every single inch of the circumference, but certainly if you're in the town square and you go any direction, you're gonna be in the battlefield at some point. I mean, there's like a couple of roads that you can take out of town that wouldn't technically be in the, you know, going through the battlefield, but given what happened here and how it all played out, pretty much everywhere you look is, you know, battlefield. Like right now I'm getting off on PA 116. I'm headed towards Hanover. So I'm a mile from the borough of Gettysburg. And because I just stopped at Sheetz to get a soda. But so I'm a mile from the borough to the east. But as I turn here, like obviously I just got off of 15. As I turn here, I'm gonna go east, and I'm gonna drive through the East Cavalry Field. I'm gonna drive through places that, you know, a lot of soldiers moved around, a lot of artillery pieces. I'm gonna go through an intersection where George Custer, as a brevet brigadier general, mounted a charge with all his Michigan Wolverine cavalry troopers against Jeb Stuart's cavalry. And again, that's called the East Cavalry Field. It's not really contiguous to the battlefield, but I'm also coming over Brinkerhoff Ridge, which was a place there were, you know, so like the main battlefield was the main battle, but there were like fights and skirmishes and, you know, men under arms going at it all sorts of places. So anyway, so I wanted to talk about oh, I didn't finish my thought though. So I went for a bike ride on the battlefield, and it felt good. My legs worked good. I had some power. I didn't feel like, you know, passing out. I rode up Culp's Hill. I went all the way to, you know, but it's not very far. It's a few miles. No big ride, but I had a big smile on my face because it's a milestone, you know. So anyway, I wanted to talk about, I got this, somebody, it's kind of funny, somebody made a comment on a video and they said, what do you think about, like AI and stuff like that? And, I guess I would call that like self-driving or, automated trucks or whatever. And then I came upon an article just today about Kodiak, which is one of the companies that is developing autonomous trucks. And one of the things that they talked about was a test that they ran, and it's a system called Vera, V-E-R-A, I think, and it stands for like visually enhanced something or something. But and I'm sorry, I don't remember the whole acronym. But basically, what it is using AI. So if you think about those Netrodyne cameras that I've talked about in the past, it's using AI to essentially grade the driver. Now, the camera system we had at Bowman, we started out every day with 1,000 points. You could end up with more than 1,000 if you did everything right and you did some other things that were seen as like proactively correct. So like maybe you were coming up on stop traffic, but you recognized it earlier than the average driver, and so you would be like, oh, I'll start slowing down or whatever. Or maybe there was some, something blocking your lane and you recognized it early and moved over or something. But it goes down from 1,000 points. And at Bowman, if you wanted to get your weekly like safety bonus, which was like, I think 2 cents a mile extra, I think that's what it was, then you had to have a weekly score above 850. So I guess one way to look at that is like 85%. But in this test that the Kodiak trucks did, the AI driver score, and this was on 100 scale, so not 1,000, but the 100 scale. The AI driver scored a 98, which, as they point out, even with an automated system, there are going to be things that happen on the road that the truck doesn't react 100% correctly, if you will. But and they pointed out there are drivers, human drivers, that can get those same scores. But that, a lot, I think they said the average is probably in the 70s. So I don't know, like mid 70s. I don't know who, they're testing. I don't really know. And as they point out, there are a lot of these, trucking people that are putting these automated trucks together, autonomous trucks, that don't really share all the data. Like they don't ensure that the full truth is known. And there are times where the human drivers take over, and there have been instances where the trucks have just kind of like hit things, and we know that like with the like autonomous taxi cabs, like it got so bad in San Francisco that they kind of just said, no, you can't do this. They were running over fire hoses. Like they didn't handle situations where other humans were in a way that a normal, not drunk human would handle it. And so it really is, and I could think of a bunch of things that have happened to me over the years, both in a car and in a truck, where I'm like, the only reason that I was able to react completely correctly was that I was like, I had experience, right? I had intuition. I had, you know, stuff like that. Now people will say, oh, well, AI can be taught that. And I'm just like, a friend of mine who's like very, very knowledgeable about computers and computer systems. He was like, you know, if you look at like the number of bits of information that AI-based computers can process, he goes, it's not even close. Like, not even like 10% of how a normal human brain can process all sorts of stuff. And I don't know, candidly, I don't know how much these autonomous trucks cost. There are some autonomous trucks running cargo. There are some that, you know, run successful road tests. But I don't know what the cost is. I mean, obviously they don't need health insurance. They don't need a 401k. So maybe over time it can pay off. But here's what a lot of people ask, and that is my job going to be taken over by an autonomous truck or by AI? And my answer is and has been no. And there's somebody that's commented on my videos in the past, and they said, you know, they can't even get automatic faucets to work in bathrooms. And yeah, that is true, right? Like, a lot of times you're waving your hands under it or whatever. But even if somebody can say they can run like test after test after test, and say, oh, this is safe, it doesn't change the fact that there are thousands of things that a driver does on a daily basis that's going to be extraordinarily hard to replicate with just a truck that has been made autonomous. And by the way, if there are any truck drivers involved with autonomous trucking companies, you know, you're a traitor, because you're just screwing over, you know, you're possibly screwing over other truckers. Now, I'm not such a Luddite that I'm like, oh, well, you know, technology is bad, right? I mean, I'm driving a vehicle right now that has technology that didn't exist 10 years ago. And it certainly didn't exist in my, you know, when I was born. And it didn't exist 100 years ago. So, I mean, the time marches on, right? Like the Industrial Revolution, or, you know, machines that make things easier for humans. But machines that make things easier for humans also typically cost people jobs. Good example is the coal industry. You know, I always hear people of a certain, you know, locale and a certain political party talking about, you know, bringing coal mining jobs back, and I'm just like, that, just saying that, I mean, you know, on the margins, oh yeah, sure, if you open up a coal mine, you might need 50 miners, but that mine 50 years ago needed 400 miners. But here's the interesting thing about that. With automation, and I shared this fact with somebody, and it is a fact, you can look it up. The largest number of coal miners in the United States occurred in 1918. 1918. So what is that? 107 years ago. In other words, for 107 years, the number of jobs for coal miners has been decreasing for 107 years. And if you know anything about industry, or maybe about Navy ships, you might know that by the turn of the century, like there was the Great White Fleet when Teddy Roosevelt was president, so right at the turn of the century, right? Those were coal-burning ships. But the Navy had already started moving away from coal, like rock coal, to what they called coal oil. And lots of times, you know, when you drill for oil, it's in, you know, there's going to be coal around it because they're both carbon-based. But here's the interesting thing about that. I think the real death knell for the coal mining industry in this country is when EMD, Electromotive Division, which was part of General Motors, came out with the first very reliable diesel engine, because that was the end of steam engines. I mean, it was the beginning of the end of steam engines. And ironically, right, most coal is transported by railroads. But I don't think the coal industry really realized that, you know, just that technology, right? Diesel's not a very clean burning technology, but it's cleaner than coal. And, you know, and also it was just efficiency and manpower, right? Technological advances costing people jobs, right? My father worked on the railroad before diesel engines were completely the norm, right? Before all of the, you know, steam engines were gone. But it, you know, steam engine had a big crew. Like they had, I don't know, they had like a fireman, a brakeman, engineer. They usually had like at least 4 guys, a waterman, water tender. There was a lot to pay attention to, and it was a big job. But anyway, getting back to the trucks, right? Are they going to cost people jobs? And I don't think it's going to be like, you know, like other industries where all of a sudden looks like everybody vanished. Like nobody is a telephone operator anymore. That's not a thing. But it was when I was a kid. And, you know, there's a lot of jobs that have moved away. But the difference between trucking and a lot of other jobs that vanished because of technology or technological advances is that at the end of the day, a lot of trucking is still kind of like manual labor. And there are loading docks that maybe an autonomous truck can back into. But those loading docks are going to have been designed with autonomous trucks in mind. I don't think you're going to have an autonomous truck go to a refrigerated receiver and back in a door at 2 o'clock in the morning in a pouring rain in a place that has almost no light. You know, and that's even if they open the doors from the inside of the building, which is pretty rare. There's a few places where they're like frozen or whatever, like they're like, leave your doors closed, we'll open them from the inside. But that's pretty rare. And I could think of 100 different places where there's no way an autonomous truck was going to back into those doors. And isn't that right? Like that's the bottom line, getting cargo from A to B. But the A is not just the freeway. The A to B is not just the freeway. It's picking it up, checking the bills, and, you know, again, there are workarounds for some of this. Like they could just transmit the bills. But that would require, I think, a change in the law, because if a truck is loaded and a DOT officer stops a truck, which they could do with an autonomous truck, the bills have to be produced. I mean, think about it. When you go into California or you come out of Florida, right? What happens? No matter what, no matter what time of the day, weigh stations might be closed, but those agricultural monitor places are always open. I mean, you know, I've never gone into California, no matter what time of day or night, or, you know, when they didn't have somebody in the little booth asking what I'm carrying. I never gone in or left Florida without being asked. You know, and sometimes they just wave you through. They're like, yeah, whatever. But that autonomous truck, you know, I don't know how it answers that question. In other words, it's not just the technology, because unlike the coal mining industry, which was self-contained, right? Like they're like, oh, we got a machine that'll mine this coal and take the job of, you know, 100 coal miners, and it'll dig the coal and it'll put it on a conveyor and it'll run it out of the mine shaft down to a coal loading facility, and it'll just fill up a train with coal. But you know, that's a closed environment, right? Like there's no interaction. It's like, hey, we're mining coal in Kentucky, you know, CSX, or back in the day, you know, Chesapeake and Ohio, they're picking up our coal and then off it goes, right? It's like one giant transaction, but it's all like, it could be automated, but not picking up and delivering, especially perishable. And you know, it's like, can you imagine somebody saying, oh yeah, we're going to send this autonomous truck to Tyson to pick up a load that's going to Walmart? That I have no idea when that'll ever happen. So if you're in the trucking industry, and by the way, this takes, I haven't even taken into account all of the other manual labor, all of the other vagaries of trucking. Like, are they going to trust autonomous trucks with flatbed loads? Like, who's gonna secure the load? Who's going to be responsible for securing it? Who's going to be responsible for stopping and doing those securement checks? There are as many variables in the trucking industry as there are trucks on the road. I mean, I look at the job that I left recently. I hauled sawdust. I loaded my own trailer sometimes. But, you know, and at some stops, I had to untarp the trailer. Like the empty trailer, I had to untarp at a few stops. At some stops, I had to untarp, load myself, tarp it back down. And I mean, there's no robot that's gonna do that. Because everything, here's the thing, everything has to be perfect for the system for that kind of system to work. You know, and I'll give you the perfect example, a printer. How many times, if you've been around a while and you've used a lot of printers, how many times have you seen a networked printer not print your stuff? How many times have you had a desktop printer that all of a sudden decided to print everything that had ever been ordered for printing? And you know, you're literally going through an entire ream of paper because some signal went to that printer and now it's printing out 417 pages, and all you were trying to do is print 2 pages. And so I really just don't think, and I have not seen evidence that tells me that trucking is not going to be a solid job for a long, long time. I'm not saying trucking pays enough, although interestingly, I do think that, you know, getting rid of non-domiciled CDL holders, cracking down on all sorts of stuff, and honestly just cracking down on, you know, enforcement. I've said it hundreds of times now. Cracking down on enforcement is going to drive up freight rates. It's going to increase. It's going to make trucking companies more wealthy, but it will also increase driver pay, because the last big pay increase, you know, market increase for driver pay was around 2020 at the start of COVID. But driver pay has stagnated in large part since then. So there were companies that were all of a sudden offering a lot of money, and then, you know, that's just leveled out for like 4 years, even though like inflation has increased substantially. But I think that if, you know, I saw some number where it was like 800,000 drivers could be off the road by the end of 2026. If that happens, I will tell you that the vast majority of those 800,000 will be people that drive OTR. So if you're in the OTR space, I mean, I don't think it's going to affect many people in LTL. I don't think it's going to affect many people in like very, you know, like specialized areas like heavy haul or whatever. But if you're just the average OTR dry van guy, you're just the average OTR reefer guy, it'll have an impact. It'll have a big impact. And I think that you will see wages starting to tick up. You will see companies that are now, you know, like I told you, National Beef was like, oh, we pay 50 to 58 cents. And I was like, well, I got 6 years of experience. How much would I make? And they're like, oh, 50 cents, right? That's not going to work for them anymore. If all those because keep in mind, a lot of National Beef's product is probably moved by drivers that, you know, not U.S. citizens, etc., right? You know, not people that speak good English, whatever it is, right? And so as a trucking company, and I mean, I know they have other people that haul their stuff, but they're going to have to pay more. That range is going to go from 50 to 58 to like 55 to 63. And 5 cents is a lot. I mean, in the case of 50 cents, it's 5 cents is a 10% pay raise. I think that'll help. But if you're thinking about coming into trucking and you're like 30 years old and you're like, man, I don't know if I want to do this because, you know, some robot might take my job. You know, I guess it's possible that a robot could take your job, but that robot is not going to take every job that you could do, if that makes sense. So maybe a robot takes a job from somebody, but if that person is like, oh, well, I'll just pivot and go into a different part of trucking, you know, that's going to be available. But let me share just one last thought with you. You know, a lot of people piss and moan about things they don't like, and a lot of them are like shouting into a freaking cave on social media. They're hiding behind a screen name and they're saying stuff that, you know, maybe makes sense, you know, stuff that I would probably agree with, but they're not really doing anything about it. Because telling me, or, you know, even a guy like me who has some kind of mouthpiece, right? I have, you know, over 4,000 subscribers, but I don't make, you know, I'm not going to make a difference. But here's what will make a difference, right? And that is every truck driver, every truck driver's spouse, significant other. If your mom is retired, she's got nothing else to do but call Congress. And all those numbers are public, right? People can send emails. They need, you know, Congress, state legislators. You know, can you imagine if you convinced the Illinois state legislature to not allow autonomous trucks in Illinois? I mean, that would cut down on it. But, and here's the thing, robots don't vote yet. Robots don't vote. So the squeaky wheel gets the grease. You know, there are groups like OIDA who still seem to be wrapped around the axle about stupid shit like electronic logs, which, by the way, that train's left the station. I don't know why they keep talking about it, but there are advocacy groups, but they're not big enough. They're not powerful enough. They don't have membership that they can get to vote as a block. I mean, heck, trade unions don't anymore. They, like the Teamsters or, the IBEW or the UAW, they can't guarantee that all their members are gonna, 98% of their members are gonna vote a certain way in an election. But individuals do matter, right? Like, I know that legislators do listen, and because they're worried about votes. And so if everybody just mounted a campaign against these kinds of, automated, autonomous trucks, and then you get organizations like AAA, for example, and you get organizations that are like safe highway organizations. It's kind of funny, right? Like, sometimes the people that you think are against you could be your ally. You just gotta get it together with them. So if you want to know what to do that. And all the numbers, every single congressperson, every single senator, every single congressman, they all have numbers to both local offices and their offices in DC. And there are people that you will talk to a live person, they will take your phone call. And you can say, hey, I'm a constituent of Senator so-and-so. I live in this state. I'm a constituent of Congressman so-and-so. One person's not going to make a difference. But let's say, 3,000 people that are constituents all call about the same issue. They're going to start paying attention. And so it doesn't matter if you call your wife, your kids, your mom, your brother, your barber, your bartender, who gives a crap, right? Get people calling, get people sending emails. And it can, slow things down. Because the interesting thing about a lot of these startup autonomous truck companies is they do have capital behind them, but they're not huge companies. They're not household names. And until they become that way, it's easier to take them on politically. So anyway, appreciate everybody watching, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.